If we look at the vol side of things, realized vol in crypto has fallen off a cliff. You can see that in these yellow lines, just kind of going materially lower. So we've got 30 type levels on both Ethereum and Bitcoin. Even Ethereum's realizing a 30s, mid-30s vol. Implied vols in the 1 month bucket dropped by about 2 vols a piece in both assets. But weekly Bitcoin has firmed up a little, as it did seem to get absolutely crushed to a bit oversold levels. And there are a few macro events coming up this week. Now, carry has gone deeply positive in both names, order of magnitude, sort of 20 vol points. So certainly attractive for those wanting to sell gamma, expecting markets to stay in the ranges. I wouldn't be surprised if these ranges held for a couple more weeks as we await those ETF launches out of ETH. So yeah, I wouldn't be in a rush to pay loads of decay right now. Actually thinking that being short gamma, being short premium makes sense. I have actually done some trades to that effect, which we'll talk about when we go over the portfolio. But I do think any short vol bets that you put on need to be done with wing protection. You don't want to be selling naked risk here. Vols have already come down a long way, so it's not really worth your while selling naked vol. So I would always recommend doing spread trades or flies, condors, those type of things. Looking at the term structure, Bitcoin term structure not doing a whole lot, shifting slightly lower in the kind of longer part of the curve by about half a vol to a vol. The weeklies were actually slightly firmer by about a vol, but really very, very small moves. Just sort of 7th to 21st of June expiries were the ones which held up better. Like they're on a 40-odd, mid-40s vol, which is quite cheap. Now, the back end did drift slightly, but nothing too material. And then skew-wise, we are seeing skew recovering a little bit there and going back towards cool skew across the curve. It was a little bit softer than that last week, but it is recovering. And we see sort of 1.5 vols in the front for calls out to about 5 vols in the back. Term structure continues to collapse in ETH into contango. So we did see a bit of a drop in the front end of about 9 vols, 9 to 10 vols, as Ethereum realized vol is quickly converging with Bitcoin. The rest of the curve was lower, but in a more weighted fashion. So you can see middle of the curve down about 2.3, back curve down about 1.5. And then calls in Ethereum had been trading at more of a premium. They have drifted in the middle part from sort of June to December, but those front end calls are quite firm at 4 vols in the next couple of week expiries. That's what we're seeing there. Relative value wise, ETH had gone a bit ballistic, trading at like 15 vols over in the front. Obviously, it got even higher before the event, but it has continued to drift. Front end down to about 10 vols there as Ethereum spot stabilizes around 3,800. The whole curve now sits in like the 8 to 12 vol range, with the 1 month sitting there at 12 as the high point, because the anticipated movement around the ETF launch kind of sits around that 1 month bucket. The ETH Bitcoin spot spread is consolidating in quite a tight range after spiking up on the ETF news. But it does very much look like a calm before the storm right now, the way it's holding and not really retracing materially from that impulsive move. Any pullback in this vol spread, if it was to come lower, we think it probably finds support at around 5 vols. I think that's probably a good entry point to get into those call switch trades. Remember that we used to have where you buy Ethereum calls and sell Bitcoin calls. I am a believer that alt season may very well be upon us this summer. And therefore, I think owning ETH calls against Bitcoin calls is probably a smart trade. Certainly, if you can get that vol spread on at 5 vols or around that sort of level. So, whilst it looks expensive on this 6 month history, if we do zoom out, we see Ethereum used to comfortably trade 10, 15 vols over Bitcoin for long periods of time. I do believe that is the market we are going back into, and I don't think Bitcoin is going to trade over like it was last year. Could be wrong, but those are my thoughts right now. Okay, and then skew. And I think the way the skew's trading, that kind of implies, it kind of backs up my theory. We got a slight uptick in the call skew and the front end expiries in both assets, as at the money vol grinds lower, but with realized, but obviously traders wanting exposure to the upside break that they think is somewhat inevitable. Hedging downside doesn't really appear to be the major concern. There was a little bit of risk reversal flow that we saw that we'll point out in a minute, but nothing too material to move the skew. ETH skew holding that premium over Bitcoin in the whole term structure. As we said, you know, people probably anticipating some sort of 10% plus rally in ETH once the inflows start. Geopolitics does seem to be softening a little bit, but that is a fluid situation. But it does look like the US are putting pressure to de-escalate in the Middle East. And that maybe takes away some of the digital gold bid that Bitcoin has. And therefore, again, another reason why it doesn't need to outperform other crypto assets. And then at this stage of the cycle in macro, we're expecting to see rate cuts coming from Canada, from Europe, maybe from the UK as well a bit later, and obviously the US. So Bitcoin dominance does look fragile if the alt leadership is going to kick off in a positive environment, liquidity-wise, with rates coming down across the globe. That is what I'm basically calling for, and what I think is probably the most likely outcome over the next sort of few months. Okay, dashboard-wise, we're kind of in the middle of the dartboard here. Slightly elevated still in ETH, vol, but Bitcoin kind of in the middle and neutral, but carry extremely positive across both assets, which is why we think earning theta probably still works. That's the summary for this week in crypto. Thanks a lot as always. I'll catch you guys later.